Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to the Daily Hindu Analysis. But before we begin, we have a small announcement. BYJU'S Exam Prep is pleased to announce the launch of a new exciting initiative, that is the UPSC Knowledge Series, which shall begin immediately after Prelims from the 6th of June. This shall be a 50-day program through which we are going to cover 100 important static topics that are going to be important for both prelims and mains. And the series has been designed to not only help those aspirants who are preparing for this year's mains, but also to help those who are preparing for 2023. So starting from the 6th of June, every day, we are going to have two live sessions at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. on our YouTube channel. And our leading faculties are going to cover various static topics from across subjects to help simplify your UPSC preparation. So do watch out for the launch of UPSC Knowledge Series and do support us by liking the videos, by sharing your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by taking up a column from page number 6 of the Delhi edition. The column deals with the topic of death penalty and capital punishment. See, capital punishment refers to the execution of an offender who has been sentenced to death after being convicted of a criminal offense by a court of law. In the case of India, the death penalty has been provided for under the Indian Penal Code, which is of colonial origin. Death penalty was a part of this British era law, and India retained the provision post-independence. But in fact, during debates in the Constituent Assembly, several members had expressed their opposition to the continuation of death penalty in an independent democratic India. But eventually, no such provision was incorporated into the constitution to abolish the death penalty. In the next few decades, several private member bills were also introduced in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, but none of them were adopted. It is estimated that between 1950 and 1980, around 3,000 to 4,000 executions have taken place in India. Post 1980, however, awarding death sentences and executing the death penalty came down drastically as a result of a landmark judgment delivered by the Supreme Court in the Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab case. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that the death punishment can be awarded only in the rarest of rare cases, and also laid down several procedures to arrest any arbitrariness in awarding the death sentence, especially by the lower courts. In the more recent times, experts in India and around the world have argued that death penalty should be abolished and it has no place in a civilized democracy. Several former judges, legal and constitutional experts, and as well as human rights activists, they have all called for the abolition of death penalty on the basis of several established factors, some of which have been listed over here. It is argued that no state should have the power to take a person's life, because such a decision would be irrevocable. Then upon this, death penalty does not guarantee a crime-free society, as empirical evidence has clearly established that the death penalty is not a deterrence for crime. There is also the risk of the process of awarding and carrying out the death sentence being unfair, and as well as arbitrary without the due process being followed. If you look at Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, that guarantees right to life, it becomes very clear that the state does not have the powers to deprive any individual of their right to life without following the due process as established by law. There are several international conventions of the UN which also take a stand against the death penalty, and as a result, many countries have even abolished death sentence. It is also argued that death penalty is not sought by most of the murder victim families, and the entire process of death sentencing inflicts a lot of pain and agony on the families of those who are on death row. And this process is said to be inhuman, cruel, degrading, violative of international standards, and as well as inefficient. It promotes the concept of retributive justice in the place of reformative justice, which is not suitable for a civilized democratic society. This becomes very clear if you look at the countries that still provide the death sentence and carry out the execution. There are around 56 countries which still do this, and most of them happen to be autocratic states or highly conservative inward looking states which violate human rights. And the list includes countries like Afghanistan, China, Iran, Pakistan, North Korea, etc. The only two countries that stand out in the list are India and United States, as both countries still provide for the death penalty and even carry out the executions, despite being vibrant democracies. According to Amnesty International, which is a human rights organization, and the European Union, majority of the executions still take place only in autocratic countries and in countries where human rights are known to be violated. On the other hand, in line with international conventions, around 142 countries have already abolished death penalty and many other countries have placed death penalty on moratorium. So on the question of whether a country should have death penalty or not, there is a wide-ranging debate and it is a separate argument altogether. But the crux of today's column in the Hindu focuses on reforming the death penalty sentencing in order to make the process more humane and efficient. So here the writers are evaluating the procedure through which the death penalty is awarded to the accused and what reforms can be introduced into the process. See, in the case of India, the constitutionality of death penalty has been clearly upheld by the courts, including by the Supreme Court. Even in the landmark Bachchan Singh case of 1980, the Supreme Court declared death penalty to be constitutional. But the writers of the column bring out several flaws in the process adopted to award the death penalty, and in this context, they highlight the significance of the recent ruling of the Supreme Court in the Manoj versus State of Madhya Pradesh case of 2021. See, in a criminal case involving the death punishment, two sets of hearings are carried out by the court. One set of hearing deals with the prosecution trying to establish that the accused is indeed guilty of the crime. This process is largely driven by scientific evidence, and during these hearings, the circumstances of the accused is not considered. But once the accused is held guilty, and if it qualifies under the rarest of rare doctrine, then another set of hearing takes place to award the punishment. In these sentencing hearings, the court will go into the merits of the case and finally decide whether the death penalty should be awarded. Experts have long argued that it is in this process of sentencing that the circumstances of the accused has to be considered before the death penalty is awarded. Because today, there is enough scientific and empirical evidence to prove that human behavior and human choices is influenced by a complex interplay of factors involving both personal factors and environmental factors. Especially in cases involving the death penalty, it becomes important to understand the socio-economic background of the accused and the circumstances in which the accused grew up. But before the Manoj case of 2021, courts were not considering any information regarding the accused, and while sentencing the guilty to death punishment, the background and circumstantial factors of the accused, such as their economic status, whether the accused had adequate legal representation and legal aid, and the context in which the crime was committed. So this was resulting in arbitrary death punishments being awarded by the lower courts, and studies have clearly shown that procedural unfairness is quite common, especially at the level of lower courts, while awarding death sentences. And once the death sentence is awarded, for years together, the convict remains on death row until he finishes all his appeals at the High Court and the Supreme Court, and finally seeks pardon from the President as per the provisions of the Constitution. This entire process can be very agonizing for the accused and the family of the accused, because later when these cases come up for appeals, especially the Supreme Court, in most cases, the death penalty is revoked or commuted, and in quite a few cases, the accused are even acquitted by the higher courts. For example, just since September 2021, the Supreme Court has heard 13 death penalty cases. In these cases, the Supreme Court has already delivered judgments in 10 of them, and in one particular case, 3 accused were acquitted by the Supreme Court, and in the rest of the cases, the death sentence has been commuted. So till then, all these accused and convicts, they were made to go through the agonizing process of waiting on death row. And it is in this context that the Supreme Court has carried out a major intervention recently in the Manoj case. In the Manoj case, the Supreme Court has reiterated the procedures that were laid down by the court in the Bachchan Singh case of 1980. In the Bachchan Singh case, the Supreme Court had called for individualized sentencing inquiry before awarding the death sentence, which means that the court should consider each individual's background and circumstances before awarding the death sentence. But this procedure laid by the court in the Bachchan Singh case was never followed by the lower courts, and hence the Supreme Court has carried out another intervention in the Manoj case. In this ruling, the Supreme Court has called for evidence-based examination of circumstances of the accused in the sentencing process, which will examine the pre-offense details and post-offense details related to the accused. It will take into account the socio-economic background of the accused, the behavior of the accused in jail, the family background, any history of violence and trauma, because all these personal and environmental factors would have contributed to the eventual crime that was committed by the accused. Through the Manoj case, the court has also made it mandatory to seek expert opinions from behavioral psychologists and sociologists before awarding the death sentence, even in the rarest of the rare cases. So through this ruling, the Supreme Court has essentially cemented the life history approach, under which the entire life history of the accused will be considered by the court before sentencing them to the death penalty. Now let's look at an article from page number 9. This article examines how the Indus Water Treaty was signed between India and Pakistan. The writer of the column brings out fascinating details about the events that led to the signing of the Indus Water Treaty, which were documented in an unpublished diary by the then Indian Acting High Commissioner in Karachi. But these details may not be entirely relevant for our exams. But however, it does give us the opportunity to understand what is the Indus Water Treaty and also understand its significance for the India-Pakistan relationship. The Indus Water Treaty provides for the sharing of waters of the Indus River Basin between India and Pakistan. This historic treaty was signed in 1960 with the mediation of World Bank, and India continues to abide by the terms of the agreement. See, the Indus River Basin that largely originates in Tibet is comprised of 6 major rivers that flow across India and Pakistan. This includes the Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj. This treaty divides the Indus drainage basin into the western and eastern rivers, and the western rivers include Jhelum, Chenab, and the Indus, and the eastern rivers include Ravi, Beas, and Satluj. The western rivers have largely been allocated to Pakistan, whereas the eastern rivers have been largely allocated to India. So essentially, Pakistan has greater control over the 3 western rivers, and India has been provided with a limited set of rights over the western rivers. India can use the waters of Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab up to a set limit for irrigation and for other domestic and non-consumptive purposes. And India can also take up run-of-the-river or run-of-the-mill projects such as hydropower plants, because these projects, they do not disrupt the flow of the water into Pakistan and also does not result in the diversion of the waters. Whereas with regard to the eastern rivers, India has exclusive rights over its usage, with a limited set of rights being provided to Pakistan. To ensure that both the countries abide by the terms of the treaty, both the countries are mandated to appoint Indus Water Commissioners to head the Indus Water Commission, and they meet regularly every year to exchange information and to ensure that the other side is upholding their commitment. Since 1960, India has strictly abided by the terms of the agreement as it is part of international law and it is a part of India's international obligations. Even the run-of-the-mill projects India has taken up on the Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, such as the Baglihar project, the Kishan Ganga project, etc., they're all in line with the terms of the treaty. But despite this, Pakistan has repeatedly blamed India for violating the treaty, and Pakistan has even dragged India to the International Court of Justice and the Permanent Court of Arbitration deliberately to derail Indian projects. In most of these cases, the rulings have gone in favor of India as India has abided by the terms of the treaty. But every now and then, there has been a debate within India that whether India should abide by the terms of the treaty, even when Pakistan continues to sponsor terrorism against India. Within India's strategic and political circles, there have been suggestions that India should leverage the treaty as it largely benefits Pakistan as compared to India. And if India were to deliberately breach the terms of the treaty, or even if it decides to quit the treaty altogether in response to Pakistan sponsored terrorism, then Pakistan would be at the losing end as it happens to be a downstream country. For example, when the recent Pulwama attacks happened in 2019, there were suggestions within the government and within India's strategic establishment that India should consider utilizing Indus Water Treaty as a diplomatic weapon against Pakistan. But eventually, the Indian government decided against it. Subsequent Indian governments have remained committed to the terms of the Indus Treaty, despite Pakistan's repeated misbehavior against India. Because the reason is, India doesn't want to be seen as a violator of international commitments. And also, India does not want to give Pakistan more reasons to breed hatred and terrorism and radicalism against India. We already have terror groups like the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, and the others, who constantly blame India for carrying out water terrorism against Pakistan whenever there are droughts and floods in the Indus River Basin region. These false accusations are used as a rallying point by terror leaders such as Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhar to drive radicalization and to drive recruitment into their terror groups, which primarily target India. So, on these grounds, the Indian government as of now has decided to not weaponize the Indus Water Treaty and to remain committed to the terms of the treaty as it serves India's larger strategic purpose. Now, let's take up an article from page number 6 that examines the role of ASHA workers in India's healthcare system. See, the ASHA program was launched by the Government of India in 2005-2006 as part of the National Rural Health Mission. ASHA stands for Accredited Social Health Activist, who is a trained female community health activist. These ASHA workers are selected from the local community at the village level, and they are trained to act as the interface between the public healthcare system and their respective local communities. ASHA workers play a critical role in providing essential healthcare related information to people at the local level and in spreading awareness about the healthcare programs of the government. They act as a link between the marginalized classes and in bringing them to the healthcare system, especially the primary healthcare centers and the local hospitals and district hospitals. Under the program, only those women from local villages are chosen who are in the age group of 25 to 45 years, and they should have basic literacy, and those who have studied up to the 10th grade are given preference. Once selected, ASHA workers undergo a training through which they learn about universal immunization program, all healthcare programs related to reproductive health, maternal health, and child health, and they're also trained on the importance of sanitation and general awareness about healthcare. Equipped with this training, ASHA workers will reach out to their local community, especially to pregnant women, young children, marginalized classes in the rural areas, and those who are vulnerable to a variety of diseases. And they encourage them to reach out to primary healthcare centers and district hospitals and to avail themselves of basic healthcare facilities that are offered by the government. So they act as a crucial link at the community level to drive up health awareness and to expand the reach of government healthcare programs. They even play a role in delivering basic healthcare, essential drugs, and even sometimes vaccines to the target group. And they essentially function as the foot soldiers of India's public healthcare programs. So, in short, ASHA workers play a critical role in our healthcare system, particularly in the rural areas. And recently, their tremendous contribution has even been recognized by the World Health Organization. So, in this context, the writer of the column evaluates the challenges faced by ASHA workers and the ASHA program and lays down a few solutions to iron out these challenges. He talks about the need for better training of ASHA activists to help them understand the linkages between health and nutrition. He also calls for better opportunities to ASHA workers so that even they can see career progression and thus be further motivated to drive healthcare initiatives at the local level. Even though ASHA workers receive performance based incentives, it is not sufficient to provide for a stable livelihood and career for ASHA workers, and hence the writer is calling upon the government to address these issues that are affecting the performance of ASHA activists. He says that the recognition by WHO provides the right opportunity to address some of these pressing challenges, and according to him, these issues can be easily addressed with the right political will and with institutional mechanisms. Today, the National Health Mission has adequate funding from the government, and with the right allocation, many of the challenges that we discussed can be easily addressed, and thus the issues plaguing the ASHA program can be fixed. Now let's take up a column from page number 8 that helps us understand the European Union's ban on Russian oil. As you know, the EU has been imposing a set of economic sanctions against Russia to punish the country for its invasion of Ukraine. Recently, the EU has approved the sixth set of economic sanctions, which primarily targets the Russian export of oil and gas to several European countries. See, prior to the war, many European countries had a critical dependency on Russian oil and gas. For example, countries like Netherlands, Germany, Poland, and even Slovakia and Hungary, they happen to be the top importers of Russian oil. And many European countries have a critical dependency on Russian gas as well. And in fact, countries like Macedonia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Moldova, and the others, they have a 100% dependency on Russian gas. Even West European countries like Germany, Finland, Italy, and even France and Netherlands have a major dependency on Russian gas. And this dependency on Russian oil and gas is more amongst the East European and Central European countries. But despite this critical dependency, the EU has decided to place an oil embargo or an oil ban on Russian exports, not just to punish Russia economically and financially, but also to reduce Europe's critical dependency on Russian oil and gas. See, European countries import Russian oil and gas either through sea route, that is through seaports located in the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the others, or through the land pipeline that's called the Druzhba pipeline, which you can see over here in the map. The Druzhba pipeline happens to be the world's largest land pipeline and is essentially the world's largest oil pipeline network. These oil and gas pipelines coming from Russia transport gas and oil to several European countries in Central and Eastern Europe and also to few West European countries. Through these two routes, European countries were importing nearly 2.3 million barrels of oil and gas per day, out of which nearly 1.57 million barrels was coming through the sea route, and another 0.72 million barrels was coming in through the pipeline network. So now, under the sixth set of economic sanctions, the EU has decided to completely ban the import of Russian oil and gas through the sea route. And the EU countries hope to implement this ban completely in the next 6 to 8 months. Major importers like Germany and Poland, they have committed to halt Russian imports by the end of this year. Once these sanctions take effect, by the end of this year, Russia's sale of crude oil and gas to European Union will reduce by a drastic 90%, but only the remaining 10%, which is being imported through the land pipeline route, will be exempted from these sanctions. The reason for this exemption is because the countries which are importing Russian oil and gas through the Druzhba pipeline network, they're all landlocked countries with no direct access to the sea, and they cannot easily replace Russian oil and gas with other sources. These countries include Hungary, Slovakia, Bulgaria, and even the Czech Republic, all of which have a critical dependency on Russian oil and gas. Since these are landlocked countries, they can't easily switch to alternate sources of supply like other countries which have access to seaports. Also, the oil refineries in these countries, they can currently process only Russian oil and gas, So until they find alternative sources and until they upgrade their oil refinery infrastructure, their dependency on Russian oil and gas will continue. Hence, under the new set of sanctions, only these countries have been exempted, whereas a complete ban is being placed on sea-based imports. And by the end of this year, this is expected to bring down Russia's sale of oil and gas to Europe by 90%. Apart from this oil embargo, the sixth set of sanctions also targets few Russian banks and tries to keep them out of the SWIFT payment gateway, and also seeks to place sanctions on those who have been accused of committing war crimes in Ukraine. The new sanctions also target oil transportation companies of Russia in order to limit Russia's ability to divert oil and gas to other countries. So experts predict that these set of sanctions by the EU will have a crippling effect on the Russian economy, as it is widely believed that it was this dependency of Europe on Russian oil and gas which has essentially funded the Russian war in Ukraine. In response to these sanctions, Russia has tried to sell oil and gas at a discounted price to other buyers like India, and India has already grabbed the opportunity in order to secure a cheaper source of oil and gas. This is a strategic decision that India has made in order to reduce its dependency on West Asia and also to source cheaper oil and gas, which will help in bringing down India's import bills. Then, coming to the last article from page number 1, according to the Finance Ministry, GST collections have jumped by 44% to almost 1.41 lakh crore rupees for the month of May. This is a significant jump in indirect tax collection as compared to GST receipts for previous months. And the graph over here makes it clear that this is the fourth time that monthly GST collection has crossed 1.4 lakh crore rupees since GST was introduced. This significant jump in government revenue points towards increasing economic activities, which is being driven by domestic production and other domestic transactions, and as well as by increasing imports of services, both of which points towards increase in domestic economic activity. This trend is being reported across multiple states, and it is a healthy sign that demand and growth are picking up after the pandemic. And this significant jump in indirect tax revenue will offer a cushion to the governments, which otherwise have been struggling over the last 2 years as a result of the pandemic and the lockdowns. Now let's take a look at the mains practice questions. The first question: examine the challenges in reforming death penalty sentencing. The second question: analyze the significance of the Indus Water Treaty. Should India consider using it as a leverage against Pakistan for its sponsorship of terrorism? Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which the link has been given in the description box below. So with this, let's conclude our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.